So, welcome back to Colossus Flex Elite Talk, the podcast where we learn from the best of the best, top athletes, smart strategies, and real talk about how to train harder, race faster, and keep improving. This is where we break down what it takes to perform at an elite level so you can bring that mindset into your own training. Today's guest is Hugo Huge, Fura world champion, team captain of the Swedish Hyrox Relay Team, erg expert with a personal best in solo man pro 56:32. Welcome to Mr. Get to Work.
Thank you, Stefan. Really nice to be here, and very interesting to hear about your approach with this new podcast as well. So I'm really excited to see what I can contribute with to the audience and to yourself.
First of all, I'm sure I forgot something, some titles, something that you did. So maybe you let us know what else you are champion in and what basically you're doing.
Yeah. So currently, or the last maybe 2 years, I've done obviously a lot of high rocks. I have a personal best in 56:32. I started in the beginning of this year in Malaga, in the pro division. I've also done a few mixed doubles and also men double races. And besides that, I've done a little bit other more like fitness races in the community. I really like the ergs, so I've done the triathlon race in the UK a few times, which is 20 minutes all out on each erg, so ski, bike, and row, which I had a record on, and I've also been a champion 2 times with a total of more than 1,400 calories over an hour. So I obviously spend a lot of times on the erg, so I really like to try my abilities in races as well. And I've also been very active in the Fura World Race, which is a Canarian Island race, or from the Spanish community actually, which is quite similar to Hyrox, but they added like the bike erg and the assault bike also into the mix. And then it's very similar to the stations. So it's 10 stations, and it's also like 10 runs at 750 meters, which I also claimed a few first titles in the last years. So that's what I'm doing. But Hyrox has obviously been the biggest part of my racing in the last years. And before that, I was very active as a full-time triathlete many years ago, 6, 7 years ago, mostly competing in the short or even up to middle distance. So I was quite competitive back in the days. I won the Stockholm Triathlon, which was the biggest triathlon in Sweden at that time in the Olympic distance. So I had quite a few years with more like endurance-based training as well. But now it's obviously more focused on the functional fitness part of things, but not purely Hyrox, even though that's like a big part of where I focus my training, but also other races.
Yeah, I think we all know you from all the crazy workouts you're gonna do. Always share on Instagram that is insane sometimes what the amount of training you're putting in, and that's why I'm also happy having you here. When do we see you racing again in Hyrox?
Yeah, so the plan was actually for me to race in Mexico this weekend, which was the plan like I had for the season. And I was planning to go to Mexico since it's high altitude. You need to be there obviously a few weeks before. So I was planning to go there for 4 or 5 weeks, and then I'll do Mexico this weekend. And I was flying down to Chicago, which is the coming weekend, to do the race there, coming from altitude down to sea level, and see what I could put up for result in Chicago was the goal. But I felt like it was not so good timing. I feel I'm fit. I'm good place when training, but I had so extremely good consistency and training results in the current setting I have here at Plaitas throughout the last month. So I really didn't want to compromise that and even risk to go to Mexico with an entire new setting. So I just wanted to keep on training for a couple of more months before I race. So as it looks now, my next race will be Verona in the beginning of December. So it's 7th, I think, on the Sunday. And then, I had a very long period now from Chicago. I didn't do any Hyrox race from Chicago until now in Verona in December. So it's like 3 months of just pure training, and that feels very good to not stress into things. So Verona is my next race.
So, would you currently say your main focus is Hyrox, or you're training for something else?
No, for sure. My performance is directed towards Hyrox. That's correct.
When it comes to training, you have a huge volume that you are implementing into your training. Maybe you can break that down. How does your training look like? You do 70% easy, 30% hard. How does it look in general, your training?
Um, yeah. In general, like my training load and my training hours, as you say, volume is relatively speaking quite high. So I I'm not often below 20 hours a week and up to 30, sometimes even 35 hours a week of training. So that is with, from many people's perspective, a very high load, but I also accumulated a very lot of training volume throughout the last 10 years as a triathlete, not least. So I've had about 1,000 hours of training a year for more than 10 years, which means that a 20-hour training week is, yeah, like my base volume where I keep my base training. And in general, I will say I don't spend too much time in lower training zones. Actually, I don't do, especially on the running. I do very few or very limited time in the lower training zones. I would say almost all my training is focused to build up more sub or a little bit above threshold, which is zone 4 heart rate, zone 4 pace, around that race pace. That's why I try to accumulate as much training time as possible. I think, like from a running perspective, I don't do zone 2 running. I don't do lower intensity running really. It's always tempo threshold or above threshold. I see no benefit to do longer zone 2 efforts for me, because I think in one perspective it comes with partly injury risk to do like even more high running volume, and I think I keep a very good quality in the running volume that I do, which is around 60 to 70 kilometers this week. This week is a little bit more than 70 kilometer, but I feel like, yeah, I could add more running volume, but I prefer to add that volume more on the ergs, which I spend even more time on, maybe in a little bit lower zones, right? So I try to first plan my running from a Hyrox perspective to have like as much and as good quality as possible around race effort or around what you could call like a threshold zone, and also a little bit above, obviously. I think running too slow, for me, of course, I'm talking from my own experience, but also what I've seen in a lot of athletes I've been coaching, that running too slow too much will also make you slow, right? Because your body is very easy to adapt to what you're doing. So I believe it's much more beneficial from like a biomechanical perspective, from more of a stride perspective, to have the running around what's specific to your race, right? If we're talking high rocks, obviously. So that's why I try to put as much time as possible for the running part. Then I think definitely it's beneficial, and I do it a lot to add more volume on the ergs, for example, because it comes with a very low impact, and it's very beneficial for the aerobic capacity, obviously, and it comes with a very low injury risk and a very low impact on the body. So that's why I try to like increase my volume a little bit more on the ergs, obviously. Yeah, in short.
In short, yeah, because a lot of people always talk about zone 2 training is important, but as you spoke about, it's your personal approach. So not every person is the same. And I suppose it is important to add also low intensity. Would you say also that you do a lot of biking still, or you cut that completely out and it's more
No, I
running?
would say currently I don't. I see no. Yeah, I can add a bike session now and then, but no, it's not part of my like plan or my base training. I think like, if I want more volume, I can simply add it on the ski and in the row instead, which is, I would say, I mean, since there is no bike in Hyrox, I see no reason to do biking instead of rowing or skiing if it's still like low impact, low intensity training. For sure, it can have benefits for in some context and at least for other athletes as well. But I see no reason to do bike instead of ski or row.
So we're talking about you add more volume on the ergs. Share to the people what means more volume, because I've seen a post also that you did like 200K in
Yeah.
the week on ergs, which is insane.
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, I can handle obviously good, very high volume training on the erg. So I build up a very good capacity, where I can spend a lot of time on the machines without getting notably like fatigued or notably like longer recovery time, because I'm also become very efficient in how I move on the ergs, right? So which means I can spend hours on those ergs every day, and it's still being able to have quality in my other training, like my more higher specific training or my running training. So that's why I've built it up like the last couple of months, to more than 200 kilometers in one week on the ski and the row, and like 150 k's although is the ski. So I think ski is also something that I also a little bit enjoy more, but I also think it's easier to handle the ski load than the row load, because obviously the rowing comes with more lower body work than the ski, right? And we still have a lot of lower body work to do for the Hyrox, not especially running and all other stations is more lower body focused, right? So that's why you can also spread the load a little bit more by using more on the ski. So that's how I think about it.
When it comes to the Hyrox, when you think about ski and row itself as the station, um, how do you approach the station in the Hyrox? You're approaching it to recover on the ski and on the on the row, or you're approaching it and you're going all out on these stations, or you stay in threshold? What is the benefit on it? So you could maybe push the run after faster, or going better into the sleds. Maybe you
Yeah,
run us through this a bit.
yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, my general approach is to recover on the ergs. Yeah, that's correct. And with that said, I always try to higher my threshold so I can have like a more higher pace, but still recover on the ergs, right? So I still want to come out of the station more fresh than I entered those stations, because I know my capacity is so high on the ergs, for example. And I want to be like, yeah, fresh, or I want to be more recovered going out on the ergs than going into the ergs. So I'm ready to hit a fast run. So that's the
Mm.
strategy for me.
Yeah, that's interesting because I spoke a couple of days ago to Sean Noble, and he has exactly the same approach. He uses this to recover, and then he's going hard on the run next to it.
Yeah, and also from another perspective, I mean, since the ski is the first station, we know that many people go too hard in the first station. It's also another point that's important to remember. And I think, like from a psychological perspective, to have the row like more of a cover station when you are a little bit longer than half of the race, and you're able to like sit down and you can relax a little bit more. I think it's like mentally very, very, very nice to have that in mind. You know, when you do the burpees and then you go into the next run, and then you will finally reach the row, so you can like relax more and recover for the second half of the race. So I think it makes a lot of sense from more perspectives as well.
I hear you talking also a lot about damper setting and the stroke rate. So maybe you can share your thoughts on this points.
Yeah, so obviously I've been talking about that a lot. I mean, I have not done erg training for so long. I started with erg training less than 2 years ago when I started with Hyrox. So it was like December 2023. But obviously I've learned a lot since. But what I quite quick realized was that way too many athletes, and also myself in the beginning, was fatiguing so quickly in, for example, the ski in the upper body, or on the row in the back and in the legs, right? When going like usually a bit higher in the damper setting, as most people do when they think they are strong and they think they are fit. You know, I also thought that in the beginning. But what I realized was when I got down the damper, I could move much better and much more efficient on the machines, right? So I can find a much better flow in the movement and not so forced movement. Because yeah, if you have a higher resistance per stroke, whether if it's running or cycling, or you have more torque and so on, it comes with more muscular fatigue in general, right? And seen from a Hyrox perspective, and for me doing a little bit more endurance-based workout, I get so much limitations from being fatigued and building up lactate so quickly when I'm having a higher damper compared to when I'm lowering the damper, and I'm able to, yeah, partly have a little bit higher stroke rate per minute, and also move a little bit more faster in the movement without so much resistance, right? So one perspective is that you will be able to move more efficiently, which I learned and which I found very, very much more beneficial on the ergs. And number two is that you are able to be more, you have more endurance because you're not getting fatigued locally in the muscle, so you can utilize more of your cardiovascular system. I usually take the comparison, if you're walking up the stairs, if at home or anywhere, if you take like double or triple steps, you know, you're stepping longer steps. It's more force per step, right? And you're
Mm.
more likely to get fatigued in your quads and thighs doing those 2 or 3 steps at a time, compared to if you are taking shorter, almost running up the stairs, right? Then you're more likely probably to use more of your heart and get a little bit more higher heart rate, right, for the same distance that you are moving. So that's a good comparison for how you can look at it. But yeah, I use down to 1 in training, and I use 2 on race day on the ski, and on the row it's like 4, maybe up to 5.
Wow.
And that's, I think it takes time to build that efficiency in a lower damper. So it's not just to put a damper down and think that you will go faster, but I do think most athletes, they will benefit from a lower damper to have a better stroke on both the machines, to move more efficiently and to not be limited by constant or direct even lactate buildup in the body, right? And also remember, if we're racing Hyrox, it's 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and or maybe 2 hours or more, right? Then maybe the effort on the ergs should be somewhere around maybe your 1 hour effort if you want to keep like a consistent aerobic output throughout the race, right? It's not like black and white. We know that more fit athletes can probably go a little bit more anaerobic on those stations in general, but you still need to see it in the perspective of, yeah, it's 1 kilometer, but it's also 1 kilometer in the context of 1 maybe 2 hours, right? Which means you might want to be a little bit more efficient and also not try to build up so much fatigue and lactate on the stations, right, in general. So that's how I see it.
You said that you're skiing on one or two. When it comes to a 1K, or you have a different approach? For instance, if you do short intervals, 400 meter, 250, you have the same damper setting?
I would say the some of rule is that the lower distance or the lower duration you go or the shorter duration you go, the potentially higher damper setting you can have, right? Because then you can generate more force over a shorter period of time. While if you go a longer distance or a longer duration, then you will be more limited by your cardiovascular capacity and want to utilize that more and not be limited by, again, fatigue and lactate. So I would say, yes, if I go shorter distance, I can have a higher damper setting. But I think if I go for a 1K, I would probably use 3 or 4 maximum. But and maybe 6, 7 on the row, because I know when I go too high in the damper, I will not be able to move as efficiently as well. But the general rule of thumb is that the shorter duration or shorter distance, you can obviously go higher in the resistance per stroke, and in a longer duration or longer distance, you likely want to put the damper down a little bit so you can utilize more of the cardiovascular system.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting. As you're also an expert and as you've also done a lot triathlon, we've seen that more and more people from triathlon entering into the elite world. Why do you think that the triathlon training is so beneficial for Hyrox, and why for people from the sport of triathlon it's easier to enter into Hyrox?
Yeah, number one is obviously that they are in general good runners, which is a large benefit from going from triathlon or more endurance-based sport to Hyrox. That's number one. And depending, if it's a long course triathlete, I think they're struggling long distance triathlete, Ironman triathletes going into Hyrox, they are likely to have like more from a technical or skill perspective, more challenges with the stations. But even like, and also handling that anaerobic high intensity load maybe, but more like short course triathletes going into Hyrox or triathletes in general, they are likely very good at handling the aerobic demands and also more of the lactate clearance demands to handling a Hyrox race. And I think like for the general athlete, the major challenge is the aerobic capacity to sustain a good pace throughout the race. It's usually not the strength for the explosiveness or this kind of things, or even like the movement efficiency, because they have a so high threshold for what they can put out like in aerobic or metabolic power, so they can still sustain a very good output throughout one of these races, even though they are not super efficient on all the stations, right? So with that said, yeah, the aerobic capacity is, yeah, it's key for a good Hyrox performance, and as long as you can learn to handle the stations properly, even though not super good, you are still very likely to do a good result, I think.
Okay, interesting. Wanted to talk more specifically about your races in Hyrox in general. I have spoken also with Sean Noble a couple days ago, which was pretty interesting. I have seen that you did a 56:32, but the day before you did another Hyrox and it was above an hour. Is that correct?
The day before I did 58.
58, okay.
Yeah.
It was slower the day before, and the next day it was faster. I have spoken with Sean, and he said something very interesting, that he doesn't taper really anymore. And he did even a VO2 max before his race in Birmingham, where he went 55 something. So I would like to know what your thoughts on that, and why do you think you got better the next day? Because there must be something behind.
Yeah, this is a very good question. I had it a lot, and I have been reflecting over it many times as well. I have not for a long time been very focused on tapering before races. I think that concept. I mean, it makes sense from a physiological perspective. Of course, you should be fresh on race day. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I also think there's a lot of other factors, not least like psychological factors leading up to race. That's very important as well. So how I see it leading up to race, no, I don't necessarily taper either. I can have 20-hour training weeks leading up to race, and still being able to perform and feel good. But I think what's even more important is to build like confidence in and self belief with like more race specific or over race specific pace sessions on the same week. But to answer the question, obviously there is no, it's not black on white either. I think for me, when I had those performances, it has not been one time. I think it's a lot about the psychological factors. I think going as I did, like in Malaga, I did 58 on the Friday, and then I had really no expectations or no pressure leading up to the next race, which means I was in a so good state of mind that I could just leave all expectations. I didn't even have my heart rate monitor. I didn't have my any of my sensors. I didn't look at the pace. I just went by feel, which led me to being a very calm state of mind, which I think is key for those performances. But it's very hard to identify for me also. I try still to evaluate how to reach that potential, because obviously it's not about purely the physiological perspective, but for sure, as Sean also says, I think it's definitely beneficial to stay on top of intensity, not least leading up to a race. I think it's very good. I think it's not beneficial for most people to as I say, lay on the couch one week leading up to race and just eat pasta and think that everything is going to be all right. I think that you need to like build up the fitness a little bit more. Of course, you should be able to have quality sessions and you should be proper recovered for a race. That's always my standpoint, but there's so many ways to reach that point. That's why I also think, like from a coaching standpoint, it's very hard to set like a taper schedule for anyone. So for me, if I coach anyone, I mean, it's so much about feeling. I can recommend workouts, I can recommend things, but it always has to come down to the athletes, and we're all very different how to handle this. And I think the psychological part is more important than the physiological part leading up to a race. But yeah, I think it makes sense to have more high intensity workouts leading up to a race, and more. I usually do a little bit more like over race pace the few days before, and even more weights on the stations and on the sleds to really build up this fatigue resistance and really also confidence to be able to handle those loads in a high intensity before the race or overloading. So yeah, there's no, it's not black and white. I have no like direct answer. There's a lot of factors going into it, but I definitely think that you are able to accomplish more than you think, even though if you're not even if let's say the circumstances are not perfect, right? So that's also a major part of it. So don't set yourself limits when you're entering those kind of races, because there's obviously a lot of people doing back-to-back racing nowadays as well, which means that it's physiologically very demanding, but not least psychologically demanding, and it's all about how to handle that.
Yeah, it was very interesting to hear also your approach. As Sean has told me that he did tapering before, and when he entered the race, he felt tired, fatigued, and it was a heavy race. When he was building up intensity, it felt like a training session the first run, and he was directly into the training, and he was feeling great, amazing. So it's definitely an approach that is something I also take personally myself as a learning.
Yeah, then again, it's very hard to know. You need to try, and that also comes with race experience, obviously, that he's describing as well. And try to do a hard training week and race and see how you feel. And maybe some people obviously they maybe need more rest and to be able to relax both mentally and physically. And but I think other people, they are more likely to perform if they are like keeping up the training to a quite good volume or quite good intensity as usual, because it always also comes to other factors like the digestive system, like how to handle nutrition and so on. I mean, for me, if I don't move the days before or at the race day in the morning, I mean, I will have problem with my digestion, because there's also a lot of factors inside the body that if I'm used to train 20 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, then what happens if I train 10 hours a week leading up to the race? Then a lot of things might change, as well. So it's always about being confident in your routines and your abilities. So try to navigate those things as well.
It's interesting that you spoke before about heart rate monitors. You didn't wear your heart rate monitor. Also, I think you spoke about it a little bit about HRV and things like this, because sometimes the devices they give wrong predictions, and it's not exactly how you feel or how what is the reality. What are your thoughts on this? And you're using HRV, you're using your devices. To which point you're gonna look at them?
Yeah, very interesting question. So yeah, in general, what I say is that you should not listen to your smartwatch to not, or you should not let it control like how you train or how you plan your training for day. I mean, how you feel will always come before what you see on the watch. And yeah, it's so common now, and I talk about it quite a lot. I mean, you see your sleep score in the morning, and for so many people, that's the key point for how they're gonna approach their day, right? And I'm
Mm.
there also. Sometimes I look at my phone or at my watch, and I see, yeah, I slept like shit this night. I'm maybe not fit to train, and then you reflect over things. But the intuition and how you feel always has to come first. And I have a lot of different sensors. I have done a lot of research on myself over the years. Everything from lactate to I have VO2 max monitor, I have blood oxygen, I have core body temperature sensor, I have heart rate monitor, and all this kinds of stuff. But I also have learned, like throughout the years, the more I train and the more I learn about myself, the less I need those things. So I gradually step away from those things. But I've also learned a lot from using it throughout the years, and I think yeah, all of those things can have a good value in some context. But I think also like those technical and also more like measurements always takes a lot of distraction from like the work and like the real efforts in the daily training. And I think for most people, if we're talking to the general community or Hyrox or whatever, most of people don't need that. Things they need to focus on learning how to know their bodies. So of course I use these things from time to time, but I also know that there is nothing that beats how I feel today. Also, that comes with doing a lot of training, right? How you feel and how you can perform in different states and so on. But I think many people pay too much attention to it. But of course, I use heart rate as a great way to measure like your effort in one context from a metabolic context. But also using all these metrics also sets you. I realized it also sets you limits psychologically, because if you see the heart rate or you see the lactate or whatever it might be, then you like directly connect and say, yeah, this is tough for you. Even if you're not feeling so tough about it, and you look at those metrics and you say, yeah, this should be really tough. And it's always about you set yourself limits in different ways also, which is what I've realized is much, yeah, like in Malaga is a good example where I just quit all this kind of stuff and just went by feel. And yeah, I had a really good performance. It's not like that's the only factor, but it's a good example for how you always need to trust yourself before all those measurements or data points.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting this part, because I also have tested, like, how is it called, Whoop and all those things for a couple of months, and it always said something different how I felt, and at one point it limited myself as well, or I started to calculate things, and the calculation was there, and then I said, okay, I don't even try it. But when I stopped using those things and stopped calculating, I I started to perform better on different aspects, which is very, very interesting, and I think is a key. I mean, it's also a big market, all those things, and those companies want to make money. Makes sense at the end for them.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah, and I mean, again, those can have a great value in some sort of context, but I think in general they take too much focus from the work, right? And I mean, some data points, it's very good to have, and or trends over time. I think it's better to see like trends over longer period of times than to just like day by day. So if you look at like a resting heart rate, that's something I use, and I think it's great to see from a recovery perspective and from a stress perspective to measure it. But then when you take your heart rate and then you take your like training load, and they take all these other factors, stress score and whatever it's called, and this device combined is to some number that's gonna like decide if you're ready to train or not, then you get so far away from reality, and then it's very, yeah, I'm very skeptical to use that uh, to like decide my training and so on. But yeah, it can be a good value, and as you said, you learn a lot from it, not necessarily what's good, but also what's bad or what's wrong with it, right, and how to navigate it. And also like with how you feel and so on, the what I've also learned throughout the years is that you can also feel like shit and perform at your best, right? Which means if you never go training when your watch says that you should feel like shit, or when you're even feeling like shit, and if you never try at those states, then you will never learn, and you will never be able to capitalize on your potential if you're only training when you're feeling good, right? That's also another point, like to always being able to evaluate and learn how different states and different fatigue and how you feel in recovery, how it actually uh, corresponds with your performance, right? So that's also a good point to have in mind, because you can definitely perform even though you're not feeling good either mentally or physically. That's why it's so important to, I wouldn't always say stick to the plan to 100%, but always to try, and then you will always be able to adjust and evaluate the feeling and the perception of how you feel from those situations, right?
Talking about the feeling and things like this, do you also have sometimes hard days, or you want to give up, you don't want to do things?
I would say I would never skip a workout. That's probably the base of, or the answer to this question. But I'm always very flexible and vigilant and humble for my fitness from day to day. Yes, and yeah, sure, I have tough days and tough training sessions for sure. But what I think is important in those situations is to be, again, very flexible with how you approach the training, right? And it's likely much better to, let's say, if you have a high intensity session and you try to start this session and you don't feel good at all, then it's likely, or it's always better to then change the session a little bit. You can add more rest, you can lower the intensity, but you still do a good training session, but with another objective or with another intensity, to still get the good training stimuli in any other context, right? So it's very important, and I do it very often to like change my training sessions based on the fitness of the day. So you're always getting something out of the training. I think that's very important, and I really think that you should always try and then evaluate after. So I usually have like a very good objective with my training week, month, and the sessions, obviously. But it's not always that I have an exact plan for what I'm going to do at the session. Let's say I'm going to do, thresholds on the ski. Then it might mean that I do 1Ks, I might do 2Ks, I might do 3 times 5K. I mean, it does not really matter. I will just try to accumulate as much time in threshold as possible, and it can be done in so many different ways. What I also think about that is, like, from a psychological perspective, it's also very, it's a very beneficial to have that flexibility in the training, right? I know the objective. I know I want to accomplish. I want to accumulate this much time in this training zone because it's correlate with what I'm gonna perform in race or for my training goals. And then it can be done in so many different ways again. And that also makes it usually very much easier to handle the training from a psychological perspective. So when I go to a morning ski, I know, I might do 2Ks today. I will accumulate about 20K, and 10 of those K will be at race efforts, a little bit more. But I can also do 20 times 1K or 4 times 5K for almost like the same training objective, right? So that is very important. That's why it's very hard. Of course, I have a detailed plan, but it's also from session to session, it's very flexible for how I approach the sessions or for how I structure the sessions. And from like a coaching perspective, I think most people, it's very good that they have this clear structure. Of course, they have the specific sessions, the numbers to follow, and so on. But when I coach, I see myself more like a little bit of a CEO of the athlete, like they are my employee. They're going to accomplish this, in this training session. And here's my suggestion, but you might need to adjust it a little bit. You might, if you feel fatigued, you might increase the rest a little bit or lower the intensity a little bit. But we try to accomplish this sort of training stimuli within this session because this is what we want to accomplish, right? So I think that's one thing that I've learned to do very consistently, to be very flexible with my training, and it makes the training load very much easier to handle from physiological perspective, but also from a psychological perspective.
That's very interesting. Like, I also thought about it the other day. Like, as a kid, we know exactly when we want to eat, when we want to sleep. Then we unlearn all those things, and then when we get older, we want to learn those things back again. This is like something fascinating. Talking about your training sessions, what would you say was your hardest session you ever did?
Talking training now.
Hardest session you had in training. Maybe people can try also outside and see how tough it was.
Uh, yeah, it's all like a balance between what's tougher, like psychologically and physically. But actually, I had a really tough training day the other week when I did 60 times 1K, and that, of course, from a psychological perspective, it was quite
The
demanding.
little 20 running, 20 sheet, 20 row. Was it this one?
Yeah, exactly. So that's obviously very. It's a 6 hour training day, and it's 3 different sessions. So I started with 20 times 1K on the run, and everything like building up to over race pace in the end. So I did 20 times 1K on the treadmill with like 100-meter walking rest. So it's quite short rest, progressive every interval. So I think I started at 4:20 or 4:15 down to, was it 3:20 or 3:30 something. So gradually increasing 2 or 3 seconds every interval. And it's also those type of sessions makes it you're very focused all the time. So it's almost 2 hours of having a very big focus in recovery, nutrition, and you need to increase the load every time, when you're managing all the data points and so on. So that was number one. And then I had like about 2 hours recovery, and I did the same on the ski. So exactly the same. I had 90 seconds rest, I think, on the ski, so a little bit longer. Started at 1:59 or 2 pace, doing 21 Ks down to 1:46 maybe. So also gradually increasing to almost race pace. Yeah, and then I did the same on the row, obviously, exactly the same as on the ski. So it's not like super high intensity, but it's still like a very high training load. But from a mental perspective, doing 6 hours of training within the frame of about 10 hours is also a lot, right? It's just like, and nutrition is also a big part of it between and during the training sessions. And I think it's more about being focused for 3 times 2 hours than anything else, right? The more physical load is I think it's manageable. If you're smart in the pacing, it makes it a lot of easier, obviously. But to handle the mental part of it is a key factor.
It doesn't sound nice to be to be honest.
I mean, it's not fun. I don't think it's fun usually, but yeah, it's very motivating, and it's very measurable, and to have those progressive workouts and from week to week, so it's very motivating in one way as well.
When you're talking about ski and row, what are your 5K times for ski and for row?
5K for row, I've done a 1:38 pace. I'm not sure exactly what time it is, so 1:38 per 500 on a 5K. And on the ski, I've done 1:41 pace on the 5K for the ski. And for the 10K on the ski, I've done 1:44. So 10K ski, 1:44 pace, and on the row, 1:41 pace for the 10K. So that's quite competitive times for both of the machines.
That's fucking fast.
Yeah, but also I think doing those tests on the ergs, requires a lot of mental resilience handling
Yeah.
those sessions, because you're so focused on the display all the time. You see the pace every stroke, you see the heart rate. I mean, compared to doing like a run outside or whatever, you're very fixed to the numbers for the exact amount of the entire test. So mentally, it takes a lot. It takes a soul to do these tests.
And when it comes to runs, 5K, 10K, half,
Yeah, I have not done too many of these tests. I did a 5K on the treadmill in 2:56 pace, so that's like a 14:26 on the treadmill. But I know I've done a 5K outside in 15:08, so it's still like a few percent slower outside on the track, which also is obviously very competitive times. On the 10K, I have not done it for like 7 months maybe. I did the 32:40, I think, as fastest. So it's also quite decent. And longer than that, I have not gone like competitive. I did a half marathon here in a very hot day in 1:30 or something, but it was more like a low intensity training session. So yeah, those are competitive times.
Fast. And strength numbers like deadlift, squats.
Yeah, so I also spend a lot of time on the base lifts. I think it's very good from not least like an injury prevention standpoint. So I have a 240 deadlift, I have a 145 bench press, and I have a 180 squat, which is something that I try to, yeah, maybe not those top numbers, but let's say 10% lower than those numbers is like a base I try to keep at all times. So I know I will be able. I want to be able to do a more than 200 kg deadlift at any point of time throughout the year, and like a 125, maybe 130 bench press, and at least 160 in the squat. And I know like I have a basic strength and like the basic athletic level that I want to be at. And I again, it's not for maybe for Hyrox specifically, but it's more like for being strong, healthy, and not least for injury prevention. I think it's very important.
I have came across. I think that happened a lot of months ago. I seen that you did a 230 sled pull in a race
Hmm?
or 231. How did that happen? Because most of the time the sled pulls are around 3 minutes. What do you think was making a difference there? Why could you go to a 230 man pro sled pull?
Yeah, I think that was in South Korea, if I'm not mistaken. Was it last year? Yeah, I did a 230, and yeah, that's a really fast sled pull time. I think at that time it was definitely one of the fastest times ever in the men pro, and I don't think the sleds has become easier since. So, yeah, I spent a lot of time on the sled pull, obviously, but I was focusing a lot at that time for building the explosivity in the hip movement, especially. So a lot of like hip thrust, a lot of sled pull movements, obviously, but all of lower body strength as well, to really work with a hip explosiveness. Because I think for the sled pull, if you want to go fast, you cannot solely rely on, let's say, walking back. I think that takes too much time in general if you really want to get momentum and speed of the sled. So for what I try to do is to work even more with the hip movement. So yeah, if you're starting like more in a squat position and you really try to work with the hip to push forward and to lean backwards. And I think that I found it very effective at the time and also still to focus more on building the explosiveness in the hip and not just solely straightening out your body and then walk backwards, right? And I have video of this race. I'm barely stepping back anything, and maybe one or two steps every second repetition, and I was almost standing statically throughout this sled pull, right? Because I just worked with the hip in a very explosive movement, and I had so good momentum on the sled. And I also think, compared to the turfs and the sleds today, it was definitely not as tough on that race. But I definitely think I had a really good way to approach the movement, even though it came with a lot of energy cost. Obviously, it was not like, yeah, I was pushing hard, really hard on the sled pull to get that time, obviously. But it was a lot about how I moved as well and how I utilized my leverage in the body in the best possible way.
Interesting, very, very interesting. I have checked also a little bit. Your first race, I think, in men's pro was like 1 hour 8 roundabout, and you put it down to a 56. What would you say have has changed, or what did you do differently, or over the years, what you learned that worked better for you, or that you build up more? Because obviously, you said you came from a triathlon, you had already a good background and everything, but still there is 12 minutes in between the times. So what made the difference here?
Yeah, so coming into my first Hyrox, I almost had 109. I think it was high 108 in Stockholm, December 2023. And at that time, I was very, I wouldn't say unfit. I was still training very much, but I was not as aerobic fit as I was as a triathlete because there was like a little bit more than 1 year where I didn't have any focus on any training from when I quit triathlon. So I obviously did a lot of other training, and yeah, I still was running, but not like consistent, and I wasn't super aerobic fit, but I was still in good shape, if that's how you see it. And then it took me like, I think almost the first year, so 12 months, I almost, or 10 months, I decreased my time with 1 minute per month in general. And that was like a vision I had from the start, like to build up progressively and not being in too much stress to like get a good result. But first, also to get the race experience is very important. Because when you start with a new sport, whether it's Hyrox or anything else, I think it's very important in the beginning to do a few races to like find your baseline, right? And you always learn a lot from those first races, not least where do you need to improve. So you need to find your baseline, right? And then what I did a kind of a 1 year plan, and I set objectives of the run in a Hyrox and all the stations. How much do I need to decrease here to be able to decrease my time with about 1 minute per month, right? And then I set up the training objectives that I need to probably do 5K ski or a 5K row or 5K run in this time if I want to accomplish this time in the race, right? So it's kind of reverse engineering. So that's how I built like the plan. But for me at that time, I was in the beginning, I was also very heavy. I was almost 100 kg, I think. So obviously that was not to my benefit, even though I was still a strong guy, right? But I wasn't moving too good on the station was also one part. I mean, I had, yeah, as I said prior this race, I had no ski or road training, so I consumed a lot of energy, even though I was moving quite fast, right? But I was also consuming a lot of energy, so I suffered a lot on the runs. So becoming efficient in the station was also an objective I had, right? To learn how to move properly and to save as much energy as possible. I know I obviously have good experience with running, and I have a good running form and technique in general, so that's not like the major concern. But when I'm going into the station and you move so poorly, I also know that consumes a lot, and that will do so you're so fatigued on the runs, which means that you will move even more energy consuming, right? So it ends up in a very negative spiral all the time. So I needed to find ways how to move properly, and then build up like the general fitness and more aerobic capacity, I would say, because the strength and conditioning part was no problem. But I need to move more properly, not consume so much energy, and I needed to get some running speed up, I guess. So that was the approach I had from the start.
What would you suggest a person that is right now training for High Rocks is essential in a training plan? What cannot miss in a training plan, according to you?
I know. I think for the general athlete, talking 95% of the Hyrox athletes, uh, they train Hyrox, but they don't train for Hyrox, which is an expression I've said a lot. But I know a lot of people, they really enjoy doing these Hyrox training style sessions, and I think that's very good to build like a general adaptation to the movements and like more of a general fitness. But as I also said, like you need to identify your strengths and weaknesses so you can like specifically practice those things you need to become better at, right? Because
Mm.
otherwise it's very easy to just do the workouts and the work that you enjoy. And I, of course, that's very important. I would never take that away from anyone, that if you really like doing these high rock sessions, yeah, you should definitely do that. But are you training for results or are you training for fun? So that's also something that you need to reflect on, right? But I think definitely you need to, when you're planning your training, I would say first you set your running program. That's number one. I do it, and with my athletes, I also do it. You set your running program. If you want to go fast in Hyrox, you need to be competitive runner, right? Or if you want to go faster, because that's where you can gain the most advantage and you can decrease your time the most, right? So set your running program. And then I think identify your strengths and weaknesses. You look at the times and you can see like the gaps. Where am I able to cut as much time as possible? If you're doing a 4 minute ski and row, yeah, you maybe cannot, you maybe will not benefit from doing 4 or 5 hours on the ergs each week. It can be good from like different perspective, from more aerobic perspective, but you will not be able to gain so much time from those stations, right? But if you have an 8 minute wall ball, then you know, yeah, you can probably cut a few minutes on the wall balls, right? And that's probably where you can have the most bang for the buck in the training. So I would say identify 1 or 2 stations that you can find the gap where you can benefit the most from being more competitive in, right? Or if you are super ineffective in burpees, whatever it might be, right? So find those 1 or 2 stations, and then you set specific training sessions or half training sessions when you're focusing on those stations. For example, yeah, you set your running program, and then let's say if you're going to practice burpees, yeah, you can maybe add those 20 minutes of a burpee circuit or whatever after the running session, for example. It doesn't need to be like 1 hour burpees, doesn't make sense. But set your running program, identify your strengths and weaknesses. You take 1 or 2 stations, you incorporate them in the program, and also like a weakness can also be like that you are too aerobically unfit, right? If you didn't do any endurance sport before or any training at all, then those sessions might be that you need to accumulate much more training time just aerobic to work with your heart and lungs, right? And then you might need to add more, yeah, let's say time on the ergs or maybe on the bike, to get more aerobically fit. And that can also be one of those sessions where you're working on your weakness. Or for more power-based or let's say gym strength-based athletes, they usually need these type of sessions as well. And then I think it makes total sense to have when you set the running program and you can have a good quality in those training sessions. I think definitely you can add a little bit more if you have time or opportunity to add a little bit more of erg training. I think it's good because it comes with very good aerobic training for a low risk and low impact. And then I know most athletes, they want to have at least one more Hyrox or more high intensity workout a week, and I think that makes sense to really working with all the stations and try to handle the load and get a little bit more of this race specific effort and intensity. I think that also makes sense. But talking about also like training volume and intensity and this kind of stuff, I think for most people, not talking about elite or super competitive age group athletes, I think most athletes, if you train, let's say, for, I don't know, like average, how much does the general Hyrox athlete train? You know how much it is a week? It's 4 or 5 times maybe.
The normal person,
Yeah, yeah, kind of.
or maybe 3-4 times
Maybe
probably.
3 4 times, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's somewhere around four sessions, right? And I think that if you have 4 sessions, I wouldn't say only, but if you have 4 sessions, then I think in general you can have a little bit higher intensity of those sessions because you have almost 36 to 42 hours of recovery between the sessions, right? So I think you should be able to focus a little bit more around your predicted or what you think is like a little bit more race based. Not necessarily all out, but I think if you have 4 sessions, you do a session Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. And if you do a easy run on the Monday, let's say 40 minutes, then I don't think you will have so much, or I'm confident that you will not have so much training stimuli for that sort of session. And I think it's better to go a little bit higher intensity for maybe a little bit shorter duration when you have so much time between the sessions, right? Whatever it might be. So I think that's also one point for every athlete. Like if you're doing quite low volume training, you can go a little bit higher in intensity. But if you're getting up to like more training volume, talking about more than 10 hours, 15 hours a week, then you need to really be a little bit more smart about your intensity control and how to structure each session. Because it's not about how much training you can do, it's how much you can adapt to, right? And that's the same for me as well. More is not necessarily better. And it's not like the one who can train the most wins the most. It's the one who can progress the most over a certain period of time, right? This is also important to have in mind. But yeah, set your running program, identify your weaknesses and strengths, focus on those. I definitely think that you should be able to, most people can probably add a little bit more volume on the ski or row before a session or after a session. It doesn't need to be separate sessions. And I do think, yeah, keep at least one Hyrox session a week to just keep things interesting and fun. I think that's very important.
Interesting. I think that the average Hyrox time is still about 1 hour 30, something around this. So probably people training like 3 to 4 times a week. There was something interesting you said. It's not the person that trains the most that is the best at the end. Talking to different people, and they are all training around 15 to 18, 20 hours. So elite 15. Uh, yourself? You sometimes train 30 hours per week. Is it more that you do that for your mind because then you are more calm? Because I know myself, if I don't train, then I get really mad or unbalanced. Because maybe you would be more efficient if you train less and more detailed into this, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, interesting question, and it definitely makes sense what you're saying. Uh, to start with, I think it's about also managing the total stress in your life. You know, the training comes with a certain amount of stress, but you also have obligations. You have, you have a professional career, or you have a family, you have relationships as well. So what the key is to balance the total stress that you can accumulate, right? And to like handle with good recovery and good health. So that's like number one. You need to be able to identify what's stressing you and what can like balance all the areas of life. So it's just purely not training for most people, right? And yes, it's correct. Not necessarily more is better. I think that the more you train, the better you can become. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the more you train, the better you become, because you still need to be able to adapt to the training, right? And I'm still learning and trying to evaluate for myself, obviously. Um I think um, what's important to remember is that we are all responding very different to training, to different training zones, right? I think that, I mean, some athletes, they have a much bigger benefit from doing more volume in a lower intensity, and other athletes, they have more benefit from doing much less volume but for a higher in training intensity, but you can still like accomplish the same kind of results. I think it's very individual. So that's personally, I've also been elaborating with this, like doing more high intensity weeks and doing more high volume weeks and see like where is the results after these periods. So it's very it's very hard to give a specific answer for what's better and for also for like volume or intensity. I mean, you need both, I would say. I mean, for Hyrox, obviously, but it's also very context depending. And we also know, like with more training volume, it takes more time, obviously, which means you will have less time for other things in your life, which means you will probably have a larger stress on other areas and so on, and you will have harder time recovery and harder time to adapt to the training, which is important to remember. And let's say for me, yeah, I can train 40 hours a week if I want, but it's not necessarily beneficial because I have no other. Yeah, I live and train and coach Hyrox for most of my time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that more is better for me as well,
Mm.
because I always need to be able to find the balance between how I recover and how I'm able to perform in the context of what I'm trying to accomplish in Hyrox, right? So I mean, a higher volume approach would mean that I need to go lower in intensity, but in Hyrox I go quite high intensity, so maybe that doesn't make sense at all. And also, higher intensity comes with more injury risk and so on, which means it's maybe less sustainable over a longer period of time. So I think you need both, but I think it's important to remember that higher training volume, whether it's intensity or low intensity, comes with less time for other things in life, and that's very important to have in mind when you're planning your life and your training.
That's very, very interesting, this part. Also, the part of recovery, also the part in this direction. There is one big topic, but I think it will break the limit of the podcast now because we're already on the hour, like we agreed. But maybe we can run it back again because I would enter more into the topic recovery and topic fueling, which we didn't approach at all. But I think this is a very, very big topic again, and you have a lot to say because your eating days sometimes are insanely.
Yeah, that's a podcast itself. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but it's interesting. I agree.
So yeah, then I would keep it there, and I would say already, Hugo, thank you so much for your time and for all the insights. Also, people can find you on Instagram. How is your Instagram handle?
Yeah, it's athlete Hugo on Instagram, and it's the same on YouTube. I have a few vlogs there, and I try to, yeah, keep it interesting with both like crazy training sessions, but also educational content. So yeah, a lot about Hyrox obviously, but also life in general.
Yeah. Any last words to say on that, or what we spoke?
And no, it's always interesting to discuss, and with yourself, I know you also have a lot of knowledge, and I mean, it's all about sharing perspectives with each other. And as I say, I'm very open in my mind how to approach training and this sort of stuff, and it's very interesting and important to discuss with other people, because there is no usually there's no right and wrong. I mean, we're talking about humans. It's very complex, right? So that's, yeah, I love to discuss, and I'm happy to be a part, and I'll love to come back and do another podcast.
Yeah,
Uh,
the
that's good.
recovery part and the fueling part.
That's it.
Just one thing, maybe to give a little insight, because I have seen that you are drinking like 5 liters of Fanta or something per day. But we can discuss about this another time.
Yeah. That's a teaser, right? Yeah.
Yeah, a little teaser. All right, then. Thank you very much for your time, and I think you go back to work now to train. Probably next session
Correct.
on. I seen you already in the morning. You posted a story. You did a run. Um, so then, all the best to it, and see you soon. See you.